Hi everyone. I'm sorry for missing last week's video. I was hit by a flu, and I was really just sort of out of it for the entire long weekend, so there's nothing I really wanted to do, but it was just sort of how things ended up. I still have a bit of a cold right now, so my voice will be a bit funny this week. If you have trouble understanding what I'm saying, just ask me in the comments and I'll try to translate my cold speak to you. Anyway, this week I will be talking about navigating through gendered spaces, and since there have actually been a good number of videos already talking about a lot on bathrooms and clothing stores and other sort of physical spaces, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about navigating through gendered spaces in the digital world. So, things like social media websites, or even video games. So I'll sort of get a bit into that since that's what I'm excited about. I think that Bobby Joe and their partner brought up a great point when talking about buying clothes for your gender identity and doing it online. This is sort of a great thing about the internet. It's anonymous if you sort of ignore cookies and such, but it's really open ended and it's really easy to get lost in sort of not having to identify one way or another. But when you sign up for websites on the internet, you can enter this space and create an identity for yourself. And the best part about this is that you can pick and choose websites that allow you to exist non-labeled or as a blank slate, non-gendered and such. There are a lot of websites that don't force you to make this decision, but there are, a lot of mainstream ones like Facebook, which is sort of hard to get around if you want to socialize with a lot of people. I know people who don't do it, and they do it successfully, so I'm not going to discount doing that, but unfortunately it's the way that a lot of websites are like. But there are the opposite example, like things like Steam, which does not make gender even an option for your profile, so I think that's really something that should be strived towards. So yeah, I try to find websites that allow me to identify as a non-binary person. But there's a problem with this, and I find that by not identifying as anything specific on the internet, it means that you will probably be labeled as the default of whatever that website's contents are, when people don't have guides for you. So a lot of the times this means that you will take on the image of a white, cisgendered, straight man to the minds of those who are sort of interacting with you, unless you say otherwise. And this can be empowering, not to take on that identity, but to actually have a voice that would be heard that wouldn't otherwise. But it's also incredibly terribly erasing, and the worst part of this is that it can move down to lower minority groups. So if you say that you're queer, for example, people will assume that you are a white, cisgendered gay man, and so on and so forth. It goes down and down. And it's this really gross hierarchy of problematic assumptions and maintaining our own sense of identity that relies on us either coming out on more specific terms and saying what we exactly are, or being complacent with that, or even just leaving that identity on the internet altogether to itself. A different problem that sort of occurs in spaces is where we defined ourselves too much. And this happens a lot in video games where we're asked to pick an avatar to represent us, and people will start treating us based on our avatar, not actually who we are. Again, this has its advantages and disadvantages. On one hand, this gives us spaces for us to explore identities that we not be able to do, sort of in real life, which I think is really empowering in a way. But we're also only limited into what the game provides us for what we can choose. I think there are a lot of games that make it either you are extremely macho or extremely feminine, or masculine feminine. Sometimes there is a third option, a monster option. I actually read a really interesting article about that on sort of choosing your gender identity based on these avatars, which I'll link below. And I'm going to give a couple of examples of games that actually do the avatar as a non-labeled identity, or as much as you want it to, well. So the first game of this is called Journey, and it's a game that is currently only on the PS3, so you may not be able to get it if it sounds interesting, but I would look up some videos. It has some great music, great visuals. But in general, so what happens is that every player is given the same androgynous character that becomes defined only really by the actions that they do and how they relate to other players. And I think this is really good in that it doesn't gender your character based on these actions, it just defines them sort of as a being and not as, a male, female, trans, non-binary, just whatever identity. I think it's erasing in a way, but it's a step in the right direction. Another game that does this is actually one that's closing down in less than a month, and it's called Glitch. and it's this sort of exploratory social media game where you start with this literal blank slate of an avatar. Again, this could be assumed to be straight, male, white, whatever. But the real fun is when you actually get to customize this avatar. And there are literally thousands of choices of clothing and hair and skin and face choices. And I've created really dozens of outfits for my character that I think are non-binary and actually allow me to act out as that sort of character in the game. So I think that's really fun. Um, but yeah, so that is a short list on what I think of identifying within digital spaces. I'll be posting again regularly, assuming that I don't get hit by another flu. But please let me know what you thought of the video in the comments, and I'll see you next week.